Okay, so thank you all again for joining another edition of our BDPA Tech and Career Talk. I am Devin Jenkins, our Tech and Career Talk leader for BDPA. Serve as a senior staff technical product manager at GE Healthcare here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, working in supply chain analytics. I'm glad to have you all here. Per usual, I'll give a brief overview of BDPA and the Tech and Career Talks in case anyone isn't familiar with the organization or the platform. But BDPA is Black Data Processing Associates. The organization was started in 1975 as a way to provide a forum for those in the technology field to continue to develop their careers and advance in the industry, as well as an organization focused on building computer programming skills and those types of abilities within the youth of our community so that we continue to advance careers from the classroom to the boardroom. And make sure we have a diverse talent pipeline while doing that. So been around 40 plus years. The Tech and Career Talks happen on the second and fourth Friday of each month. And we have a range of speakers speaking on different topics. Some are more career related, some are heavily technology related, but people from different backgrounds, different levels in their careers speaking on what they know. So we're excited to have Ashton with us here today, over McCormick, as well as Ticket Falcon, speaking around entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship. So without further ado, I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to let Ashton get the floor and take it from here.
I appreciate that, Devin. It's always good to get back in front of the great team and the great members of BDPA. What I will say is I could talk, right? I'm sure there's those on this call that know I can hold a conversation. And I have no problem with the mic, as many would say. So if you have a question or anything as we go through this, let me know. But just for more historical context, and I'm looking at who's on this call right now, and it's interesting because a lot of the things that I'm doing nowadays kind of go back to one gentleman who introduced me to BDPA, Norm Fleming. So shout out to him, and may Earl Pace rest in peace. I remember this some years ago when I was at Miller Coors, right? I was actually a board member for BDPA, and we were doing some pretty great things to ensure that we were advancing what the organization does, right? And I think BDPA is in a fantastic spot because we need BDPA, right? There are a lot of us who are either in the technology space or who want to get in the technology space, and we need a group of individuals, like-minded individuals like us, to be able to collaborate, speak to each other, grow, and elevate together. So I'm happy to be here. And as I said, please, if you have any questions as we go through this, let me know. But I'm proud to be back as a former BDPA board member. So again, my name is Ashton Clark, and this presentation is going to be very short. You know, I often say within my fraternity, right, I'm a president of an Alpha Phi Alpha chapter. I don't know if we have any alphas on this call, but nonetheless, I tell the brothers in my chapter the 3 Bs, right? And that's the business, the brotherhood, and the bandwidth. They would know that. But for this call, it's going to be brief, brother. I want to make sure that we have a lot of time to make sure that we take care of any questions that anyone on this call has. And trust me, there's no silly question as we go through this. So this presentation, and really the topic that I'll be focused on for this particular talk, is thriving in entrepreneurship as well as intrapreneurship. You're probably wondering, well, what is that? And I've spoken about this many times. And there is a very clear distinction about what it means to be an entrepreneur and also what it means to be an entrepreneur. So I'll give you a quick breakdown. When I think about entrepreneurship, right? Entrepreneurship, at least in the way in which I define, is one's ability to work in a larger organization, usually a corporate structure, a nonprofit, or something along those lines. And they're able to work within the confines of their area to be able to grow it using that company or that nonprofit organization's resources. So in many instances, right, you can grow an entity while working as part of a larger entity while not having the same level of risk as if you were an entrepreneur. So for me, I've been, since I've graduated, been an entrepreneur for as long as I can remember, right? I've been able to work in various parts and portions of various corporations and help them grow what they're doing using those corporate resources. And the great thing about it is that it gave me a lot of perspective of what it meant to be an entrepreneur without necessarily all of the risks. But then you think about this notion of entrepreneurship, right? You probably heard the phrase bootstraps, right? Pulling yourself up from your bootstraps and fundraising and asking friends and family for money and failing and being successful every now and again, and then trying to make a series of small wins a big win, right? And that's, to me, is what entrepreneurship is: your ability to leverage your own resources, and in some instances, the resources of others, to be able to build something that you thought of, an idea or a concept that you essentially brought to fruition. And my brother and I have an identical twin brother, believe it or not, and we've been entrepreneurs since we were probably, 3 or 4 years old. And I know that sounds crazy. 3 years old, what are you talking about as an entrepreneur? But we knew that we were destined to do something pretty amazing because of just the way in which we interacted. And as a businessman, right, and as a business partner with my brother, it's a unique situation because oftentimes when we think about entrepreneurs, they struggle because they go into business with the wrong person or the wrong partners. Right? I'm fortunate to have a twin, somebody that I've experienced pretty much my entire life with, although I'll note that I was born first. So I hold that over his head as often as I get, but nonetheless, we've been with each other for our entire life. And that has allowed us to build and have and maintain a bond that allows us to do things that many others cannot. And so I'm in a unique situation because he's my business partner, but I wanted to be very clear about the notion of your partner or your series of partners when it comes to a business. Not everybody should be your partner in business, and we'll get into that. But first, I wanted to give you some context in terms of my education. And I believe in my grandfather, right? His name is Dr. Lee P. Brown. He's also my fraternity brother. And I give context about him because you have to think about the individuals in your life who motivate you, who you look up to. And my grandfather became the first drug czar under President Clinton. And you're talking about a cabinet position, the first Black drug czar. He became the first Black police commissioner of New York City, Atlanta, as well as Houston, and ultimately the first Black mayor of Houston, Texas. So when you're in a situation, an environment where you're seeing excellence on a daily basis, that just motivated me and my brother to thrive, to be successful. One of the things that my grandfather always told me is that education is the number one key to success. And it's interesting because you think about my trajectory, right? We went to high school at Homewood Foster High School. That's a prominent high school in the south suburbs in the Chicagoland area in Illinois, outside of Chicago. So went there from 2002 to 2006, and then went to the University of Illinois, actually on a pretty nice scholarship, if you will, right? From 2006 to 2010. And the reason for that scholarship is because, and I'll go back a little bit, my brother and I participated in something called the LEAD program. The LEAD program stands for Leadership, Educational, and Development Program. It's a high achieving program for those that are right between the summer before your senior year. And you basically go to an institution, and we went to the University of Illinois for a 3-week program. We became acclimated to the University of Illinois, business, engineering, all the key things that really a college student will go to, just pinned down in a 3-week period. And that got us acclimated to the University of Illinois in such a way that they saw that we were entrepreneurs. We were able to run our business at the time, and I'll talk about that in a second. And they offered us scholarships to go to their business school. We ultimately graduated not only from the business school, but also the engineering school. And that's just how things happen, right? Leveraging your network and your resources and showcasing your skills and talents can open up so many doors, because I'm a firm believer that students, right, especially high achieving students, should not be paying to go to school. In fact, students should be paid to go to school. And that's what happened with us, right? And then you think about a few years later, right, in terms of what I did from an educational perspective, went to business school. And I said to myself, I want to try to get into one of the best business schools that I can. I went to one of the top engineering and top business undergrad programs in the country as it relates to engineering and accounting. And so why couldn't I apply that same idea to business school? And so the only school that I wanted to apply to, and this is a true story, was Kellogg. And Kellogg is a business school at Northwestern University. So I'd say, at least from when I looked at the latest rankings, in the top 5, definitely of programs across the country, depending on who you look at the rankings. But nonetheless, I wanted to go into a top program. But you pay for that, right? There are things that are related to that, but there's benefits to going to a top program. I mean, it's rigorous, and most of these business schools are, but going to a program like that opened up so many doors for me, because it allowed me to take what I learned in undergrad, so that whole business side of things, accounting as well as engineering, and be able to put on my business hat after I've had years of experience working in corporate. But I remember I believe I was at a Bdpa conference when I got a call of opportunities for me to continue to accelerate my path at Kellogg. And I had a very long journey to getting there, but I was there. So that's why Bdpa is very dear to my heart, because I've had many different situations where, I've gotten some calls about opportunities for me to be able to excel in where I am based upon me really being at the conference. So very unique situation there. But that's my academic journey. And like I said about my grandfather, he always said that education is the number one key to success. And I've done everything that I could to be able to progress along that journey. So I wanted to share briefly my career path. And this would be what I would call my entrepreneurial journey. So we'll go from left to right. So I mentioned I went to the University of Illinois, had a BS in accountancy and also an accelerated minor in engineering. And the reason for that is I wanted to be able to speak both languages. When you think about those that study just business, sometimes it's hard to understand the engineering side, like bits and bytes and ones and zeros, IP addresses, how to, clocks and binary, all that stuff, right? I wanted to understand that so that when I got in an environment or a situation to speak to somebody that was very technical, I can have a conversation with them. And same thing on the business side. And so did that at the University of Illinois. And then right out of school, and I was fortunate that I met a gentleman who gave me a scholarship at the University of Illinois who worked at Accenture. His name is Harold Looney. I know, Harold, you're probably out there somewhere listening to this, but Harold Looney, much appreciated what you did for me at the University of Illinois. He gave me a scholarship, and I don't even know if I was supposed to know it was him, but I found out some way. And he worked at Accenture. And I was like, man, tell me more about what you do. And he introduced me to his company. And then he put me through the process, and I went through the interviews. And long story short, I actually ended up getting a job offer at Accenture. And that's where I started my corporate career, if you will, Accenture, for just about 2 years, traveling all over the country. I mean, I spent about a year and a half traveling back and forth from Chicago to San Francisco or the San Jose area, working for a big client out there. And I'll tell you, that was a great experience for me because consulting allowed me to get exposure to different industries very quickly in a very intense, if you want, I don't mean intense in a bad way, but an intense environment, right? Your clients need all of these documents and reporting requirements and artifacts, if you will, deliverables. And you have to be able to ensure that your client is getting what they're paid for and so that you're delivering. And so that was great for me because it opened up my mind to there's more than just what's out here in Chicago and let's say New York. There are opportunities in Cincinnati and LA and in Dallas, right? And so I got to see some of those opportunities, and I had an opportunity to meet a lot of people. And the crazy thing about it is that I remember when the Accenture stock was like $35, right? Now I believe it's over or close to $300, right? I mean, you think about that, and that was just a little bit over 10 years ago. So just something to think about. Consulting was a great opportunity for me, but I was able to use my entrepreneurial mindset there because I was responsible for, at the time I started off as an analyst, and I was responsible for creating certain deliverables. And I actually was interacting with our client directly, right? Which gave me great exposure to what executive presence actually means. But I had an opportunity to interact with these executives and showcase my skill set that, hey, even though I'm a consultant and you're paying Accenture for me to be here, I can actually help you to grow your entity, to be more effective, to reduce your risks, right? All the great things that consultants do. And that was really the first time where I put that to work. So much so that you have a client who's willing to pay for me to travel back and forth from San Francisco for a year and a half. That means I'm creating value, right? Value can be either created or captured, right? And my client was trying to capture that value, but I wanted to create it so that he could have the ability to capture it. So that was my experience with Accenture. And a lot of things come back home, right? Because I'll give you some more insight into that. But you may end up working at a company and then going somewhere else and then working with individuals from that company again, especially from a consulting partner relationship. And then after that, right, what I'll tell you is that there was an opportunity at a company at the time called Miller Coors. Now they're Molson Coors. So when I was at Accenture, I'll be honest, I was burned out traveling. I mean, Hurricane Sandy, if those of you remember, that time I was actually flying to New Jersey while I was working at Accenture, and there were no rental cars, none. I was frustrated. I was in Newark Airport, and Newark needs some updates. All right, that airport has been going through some things, right? But when I was there, I was like, I don't want to stay in this airport. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to do other things. I want to get out. I want to be able to go to my client site. Uber wasn't a big thing then. Lyft wasn't a big thing then. So I had to either get a taxi cab or get a rental car, and I couldn't get either of those. And so that really frustrated me. And I was like, I cannot believe the client that I was at and my team wanted me to travel. So I said, you know what? I'm not doing that. I need a break. Right. And so I decided to look for other opportunities. But then here's a very monumental moment in my journey. I actually attended the National Black Mba Association. National Black Mba is one of the largest, actually is the largest Black professional network in the country. And they had a business plan competition at the time called the Whiteboard Challenge, a $10,000 business plan competition. I entered that just randomly, maybe a week or two before the conference, even while I was still working at Accenture, because I had a business idea at the time. And I pitched it. Long story short, I was blessed to win that competition. But while I was at the National Black MBA conference, I met the Miller Coors team and their executive team. And we somehow, right, through the conversations that I had, a role was created for me. And I was able to help the company implement some of their acquisitions into their SAP environment. And then this again is once, this is where I mentioned Norm Fleming earlier, but this is where I met him. And I know he played a role in getting me there, because I think when you have individuals, not that I know, when you have us that are in positions, and we talked about this notion of classroom to the boardroom, when we're in positions, we have to be able to assist or bring others along as we climb. Right. And I think that's important. And that's certainly what he did, and got my foot in the door. And I was there for almost 6 years, right? Close to 7 years. And so in various roles, but you have to have others. And it's important for us to remember that, right? Remember, one, where we came from, but two, understanding the importance of giving back, right? And helping others along the way, which is certainly what he did. But nonetheless, I started my career in the alcohol beverage industry, if you will, and was there for quite some time in various capacities. And it was a great experience because I got to learn so much about an industry that I was not as aware of. And I became aware of that primarily because of the National Black Mba conference and that connection. But they're learning about the business and how things work from that sector and meeting great people. I had a blast, but during that time, I realized I need to go back to business school. I mean, there's always been a dream of mine to do that. And I had an opportunity to do so, but I went back part-time, right? So starting around 2016, while I was at Miller Coors, I was fortunate that I was able to work, right, and still go to school on a part-time basis. And that's when I started to attend the Northwestern Kellogg School of Management. And I was there for a little over 2 years. And I was fortunate to be able to finish the program when I did at the time that I did, given that I was working full-time and going to school as well. But I'll tell you, it was a great experience because everything that I learned in school, I was able to apply on the day-to-day. And that allowed me to really take advantage of what I learned. And I know there's some folks out here, and I've spoken to some of them, I'm on the fence about a business school degree and all of this. And I'll tell you, as my grandfather said, education is one thing no one can take away from you. It is one of the major keys to success. So if you have the opportunity to do so, why not? But you also have to understand your why. And entrepreneurship is really all about the why. Like, if you don't understand why you're doing something, why even do it? But my why, just to give you more context, was to show those in my community. And I live on the south side of Chicago. And I'll be honest with you, and I've spoken to many young people in my neighborhood and other neighborhoods across the city. Is really the why is interesting because the why could be so different, right? I'm doing something because I saw my mother do it, right? Or it's almost, and I mentioned this in another talk that I did a couple of months ago, and I got this from Steve Harvey. All right, he said something, and I don't know where it came from, but basically talking about a flea. Right? If you put a flea in a glass jar, right, that flea is going to try to jump, and it can only jump so high. But if you put a lid on that, right, the flea is going to jump. It's going to keep jumping. It's going to hit the top of that lid. But at some point in time, that flea is going to realize, if I keep jumping, I'm just going to hit the top of that lid. So what happens with the flea is that it continues to jump a little bit lower so that it doesn't hit the top of that lid. But what happens with that flea is if that flea were to have offspring, for instance, the offspring is going to learn to jump as high as their parent did. And then they're going to continue to pass it down. And so the challenge there is that this notion of, you learn from those that are around you, but if things are passed down to you and it's not elevating you, then you're going to continue to pass it down unless you have an intervention or somebody who can help you. And I tell that story because that was happening to kids in my neighborhood, is that they were seeing their parents do certain things. And it wasn't really what they, I guess, initially thought they could do, but their parents, and I'll give you an example. A kid told me his mom told him that the only thing that he can do is flip burgers at McDonald's because his mom flipped burgers at McDonald's. And that was a situation that really impacted me because I'm like, man, you can do more than flip burgers at McDonald's. You can own your own McDonald's. You can go to school and own several McDonald's. And that's just a situation where you need to have, and it's fortunate, and we need to remember those blessings that are bestowed upon us, but having individuals who can intervene and say, no, your expectations are too low. Why don't you raise the bar and let me help you get there? And so nonetheless, that's what I did at Kellogg. And I say this because part of what I experienced was I was the only, and I say this with all due respect to the institution, but I was the only Black student in my class of 49 students, right? I said, and I remember mentioning to the dean that can't happen. I can't be the de facto voice, right? And so what I did is I started recruiting more of us, right? More diverse candidates to be accepted into the program. They had to fit the criteria, but we had to extend what Kellogg was doing to them. That's me being entrepreneurial as well within Kellogg, just as an example. I found that opportunity to bring, at least that's a day, about 30 Black students to the Kellogg School of Management evening and weekend program. That's monumental because now that has fundamentally changed their lives. And my hope is that they're continuing to bring others along with them. That's lifting as we climb. And then you think about Kellogg, right? And so I was at Miller Coors, that actually graduated from the Kellogg School of Management. And then I took about a year off. right? I did my own thing. I started flipping houses with my mother, investing in real estate, all those good things. And I'll explain that in a second. But then I met an alum, right? An alum from the Northwestern Kellogg School of Management who was working at a company called Starcom, which is owned by Publicis Group. And her and I interacted. She said, Ashton, I just got promoted. There's a role on my team. And I'm wondering if you would be interested in it, right? And this is the power of connections and leveraging, you're bringing your whole self to work. Took me to lunch with like 3 or 4 team members. After that, by the next day, I had an offer. I kid you not, I didn't go through a long, lengthy process. There was an offer on the table and I took it to join a company that was really focused on data and analytics and understanding how to bridge the digital divide by bringing all this data together to make the best informed decisions for their client. So I was there for just about or under 2 years. And then I had an opportunity, and this is going back full circle again. I know I keep mentioning his name. I'm sure he's over there smiling if he's listening in, but nonetheless, right, I got a call, an opportunity, because I knew that Norm at the time was working at McCormick. He's like, man, things are growing here on my team, and we're doing some great things. But there's an opportunity, and if you're interested, to get involved with data and analytics here at McCormick. And so at first I was like, I don't know, I just was at Starcom. I was working for a very awesome client. It's like, I don't know. But then I thought about it. I was like, you know what? Why not? Right? You'll make 0 shots of the ones that you do not take. So I was trying to take all the shots that I could. And so I went through the process, and long story short, there was an opportunity for me at McCormick, and I started there in March of 2021. And I'm responsible for global analytics on the supply chain side for McCormick Global. And so that's a pretty amazing opportunity for me to be in that leadership role, to be doing some of the things that I love with data and analytics. But it goes back to your network. I often say your network determines your net worth. And I also say that networking, and you might want to write this down because I'm going to give you some good tidbits during this specific talk, but networking is 1 letter away from not working. I'll let that resonate. Networking is 1 letter away from not working. You have to make sure that you're leveraging your network to your fullest extent, because you never know when you may need something or need some insight. But you don't want to develop your network just to take advantage of people. You want to be able to give them something in return, make it beneficial or from both perspectives. But nonetheless, you want to be able to have a network that can help drive you and guide you in doing some of the things that you want to do. So this is my career path. I've been entrepreneurial across the entire journey. And when you do certain things and you showcase your skill set and your whole self, it opens up so many doors for you to be able to do things that you may not have otherwise been able to do. So next, I want to talk about my entrepreneurial journey. And there's no dates in here because I'm going to hit each one of these logos as quickly as I can, but to give you some context. So I mentioned earlier that the LEAD program, right? I did that in 2005, right, at the University of Illinois. So we'll start with the company Ludakicks, Ludakicks. This is a company that my brother and I started in 2005, really at the tail end of 2004, but we launched it in 2005. And the intent was we wanted to provide athletic sneakers, shoes to those all over the world on an online fashion, because we realized that many individuals were going to stores, purchasing these products. So we created our first e-commerce platform as it related to sneakers. And that company grew. And that's what really opened the door for us at the LEAD program, because they started to see that, wow, we were able to grow a company to having employees in the United States. We had employees overseas, and the intent was to have the right people and the right team to be able to help us to grow that, right? In fact, my mom was on helping us as well. And a lot of the success that we had was because of my mom and my dad, right? Pushing us and challenging us and opening us up to entrepreneurial way. And then my father, of course, exposing us to technology. I mean, my father is what that time was in tech, doing a lot of stuff at like the McCormick place in Navy Pier. And I remember he used to bring home these computers, these servers. And when he went to work, he probably doesn't know this, but I tell him, my brother and I would take them apart. We would take them apart and put them back together and hope that when he turned them on, they would still work. And lo and behold, they still work. But that is what got us interested and intrigued by computers. And this is where I wish I would have known about Bdpa at the time, because we were heavily learning how to develop and code and program and do all the things that are really super prevalent, even more so today than ever. And so that was really how we got our parlay into that. But we had to build this environment, this shopping cart, if you will, this e-commerce platform using open source platform. And it was difficult because what we want to do is very custom, but we figured it out. We created a great process and it works. That was Ludacris. But you think about this other company that you see here, 24/7 Mixtape. We started that in 2006. Why? Because a lot of artists were purchasing our products from our website. And we use a method called drop shipping, by the way, where we didn't hold any inventory, but our factories overseas or wherever they were located, we're shipping directly to our customers. But we realized that a lot of artists, athletes were purchasing our products. And we started getting these mixtapes in the mail. I kid you not, in our PO box. It seemed like every week somebody was sending us a mixtape. But we received a mixtape from a very prominent artist, a rapper at the time, who was working with us and buying a lot of his sneakers. And he was telling us about the situation, like these tapes and these CDs. Like, we need to get past that. And that's when a light bulb came off in me and my brother's minds and said, why don't we digitize the mixtape industry? And that's how we created 24/7 Mixtape. At the time, of very prominent companies who are still prominent today. We started with them and we're still around, helping artists to be able to promote themselves in a non-biased way, because these platforms, I tell you, they're very political. So we wanted to create a non-political platform. And that's how 24/7 Mixtapes supply. And then going over to the right again, you see a company called Uticketed. And I always loved this name because it was a company that my brother and I started while we were at the University of Illinois, primarily because we saw that students were still using cash boxes to sell tickets to their events on just in person, right? And so if you had a student that was coming from another university or another school, they would have to either give you the money and you would use the cash box to get their ticket, or they would have to try to pay at the door. And I would tell you that was just a process. And my brother and I said, hey, why don't we come up with our own platform? And we called it Uticketed. This is the logo, right? Event management made easy. So we've been doing ticketing since 2007. Believe it or not, we learned a lot. We helped many students across the University of Illinois and other campuses be able to sell tickets to their events online. But this is at the time, right, when we graduated eventually, and then started working in consulting and put it on hold, primarily because I just didn't have the time anymore. And we built it on a technology that became more antiquated. And this is why it's super important to understand the value of technology, how to implement it, how to maintain it, how to scale it. All those components of really scalability is critical. And we weren't necessarily thinking about that because we wanted to put something out there quickly. We wanted to put a demo and platform out there in 2 weeks so people could use it and learn from it. But then you have to be able to maintain it and be able to grow it and alter the technology if the need be based upon your restraints. And that could be if your website's getting a lot of visitors, you need to make sure that the queries that are on your website that are given the information that everyone receives are effective. And we learned a lot just in that process, but Uticketed was the precursor to one of our next companies, which I'll talk about in a minute, but that's Uticketed. The next company is Equity Twins. And I tell you, in 2012, when I was still consulting, my mom and I never remember this. She was like, hey, do y'all want to invest in real estate? I said, no, I'm good. I don't want to deal with tenants. I'm good on that, right? No, she asked again, no, you should really consider investing in real estate. And I said, you know what? Why not? If you ask me multiple times, there has to be something really good about this. And so you remember when I mentioned that I participated in the National Black Mba Whiteboard Challenge? That was back in 2012. And so at that time when I won $10,000. Today, the competition is $50,000, by the way, but at that time it's $10,000. And I won it. And so the question is, well, what do you do with the money? Do you invest it in the company that you have with the opportunity that it may not guarantee a return if you spend it, let's say, on marketing or advertising in the wrong way? And so instead, what I did is I took my mom's advice and we started to invest it in real estate. So took that $10,000. We took some of the money that we earned from our company Ludakicks at the time. We saved those profits. So we took that money, we purchased our first house, or we probably put $40,000 into it. If I'm being truthful about that, about 40. So all in all, what we paid for is $40,000 for the house, let's say, and then $40,000 fixed up. So that's $80,000, right? That's a lot of money, right, to invest in the property. But what I'll tell you about that house is that house has quadrupled in value. The same tenant that we had back in 2012 is the same tenant that we have today, right? And so you have constant streams of income. So now the money that we invested has grown. So our portfolio, if you think about it, we put $80,000 into it. Let's say the house quadrupled. That's equity. That's ownership because we own it in full. And so that's really how Equity Twins came to be. And what I'll tell you is about entrepreneurship. Sometimes you have to use non-conventional ways to make things happen. We knew that if we were going to start creating business ideas and trying to figure out what would be the one that would stick, we needed money. And we needed a constant stream of money that, for something were to happen, let's say we spent $100 on something one month and it didn't work, that we would be okay if we tried something else next month. But we needed that annuity, if you will, the money that would be flowing in almost in perpetuity. And that's really what Equity Twins has been able to do for us. We purchased our first house, and then the second house, right, which we purchased, we didn't use our money. I want to be clear about this. The importance of being an entrepreneur is how can you leverage, sometimes in instances, right, your money, but how can you leverage other people's money to be successful? And so this, you might want to write this down. I'm not encouraging that everybody do this, but there may be a case for you if it makes sense. My mother also told us and introduced us to balance transfers. Balance transfer meaning, let's say you have a credit balance or availability of credit of, let's say, $10,000. A balance transfer means that you can borrow against your balance. But in this case, you can get cash for it and be able to use your money for whatever you may need. And so we were able to use these balance transfers to borrow against our credit line. And then they gave us at that time about 2 years to pay it off with 0% interest. So imagine having a credit card. I have one for $20,000. My brother Ryan has one for $20,000. Now combined, we have $40,000 to invest in the house. That means that now we can go to the banks or, and tell them, hey, I know you're foreclosing on all these homes, right? What if we gave you cash, not a mortgage, but cash for these houses? And that's what we did. We did that with the second, the third, and the fourth, and the rest is history. And what that's allowed us to do is to build up the equity that we need in the communities that we live, the communities that we serve, because oftentimes there are not individuals that own the real estate that look like us, that actually care about the tenants that live there. And so we wanted to be different and provide them an opportunity to, get equity too if they needed to, based upon where they're living, as opposed to solely just paying rent. So long story short, that's how Equity Twins came to be. And we started not only doing buy and holds, we did fix and flips, right, as well as purchasing land. And when you think about real estate and home ownership, this will be my last point on this specific topic. There is a disparity between Black home ownership and white home ownership. There's a statistic out there, and it's roughly, I want to say, white families, right, own 70% of them actually own their own home. 70% roughly of white Americans own their own home. When it comes to Black Americans, it's about 40%. That's a 30% gap. That's huge, right? And so this is our way to be able to help kind of, bring that down by doing what we can in the areas in which we serve. But just think about that. Home ownership and this idea of prosperity, if you will, is something that many want to attain but can't. And so we need to be able to have things in place to help them and be able to expose them to it. The next item, you see our logo, you see Ashton Clark. This is me. I started realizing that, I love speaking. I told you I like the mic. Right. But nonetheless, I wanted to have something in place that when there was a speaking opportunity, I had an entity to be able to channel that through. And that's my logo. That's how I represent myself. But that's how Ashton Clark, also known as Ashton Speaks, was born. Then the last logo here, Ticket Falcon. Ticket Falcon. I love this logo because we've been able to implement a Falcon right within to an actual ticket. But Ticket Falcon is an event management and ticketing platform that provides instant payouts to our event organizers. Game changer. You think about the event management and ticketing space. Many ticketing companies that are out there are expensive, right? They sell the attendee data that you collect, and they do not provide instant payouts. And if they do, they charge you more. That wasn't fair. It's been for far too long that event organizers and attendees, in my opinion, have had to pay ridiculous fees to leverage some of these services. And that's what my brother and I said, as we were responsible for hosting and conducting ticketing for our family reunion that sees over 500 people every 2 years. We said, we can't do that. We can't wait until 2 or 3 weeks after our event ends if we started selling tickets a year ago. So we decided to create Ticket Falcon to be able to have a platform that was really for us and ultimately by us to enable anyone to be able to sell tickets to their own events online and collect payments for those paid events and receive the payouts instantly. And so that's how Ticket Falcon, no pun intended, took flight. So leadership, right? These are some of the things, and I believe too that when you're an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur, you have to be in a situation where you're leading. I believe that service is the rent that we pay for living, and it's key for me to be giving back. Because every morning I ask myself, after thanking God for waking me up and allowing me to continue to do what I do, how will I pay my rent today through the means of service? But one is that I am chapter president of Alpha Phi Alpha Mu Mu Lambda chapter, which is the third largest chapter in Illinois. It's great to get the brothers together to do great things in the community in which we serve. When you see Black men doing extraordinary things, it changes people. When you see men in suits and we dress the part, right, when we're in our alpha attire, but nonetheless, we're changing perspective. We're opening up the viewpoint of what it means when Black men come together to do extraordinary things. And as president of this chapter, that is my job. Is to encourage the brothers of my chapter to do these extraordinary things that we can continue to elevate, right? To continue to do the things that we need to do and what we promised and signed up to do as we join the fraternity. The second thing is National Black Mba. And the great thing about this is, and there was the board chair at the time, his name is Donald Comer. He was the gentleman. He's a vice president at FedEx. He's out in the analytics and data space as well. But he gave me an opportunity, especially when he gave me the check, because it was at FedEx. FedEx was a sponsor of the whiteboard challenge that I mentioned that I did in 2012 at National Black Mba conference. He was the one that handed me the check, the $10,000 check. And since then, he and I had always been connected. And so there's an opportunity, right, when the National Black Mba board was calling for applicants to, apply to be a board member at National Black Mba. And he was telling me, something that I should consider. I'd already been a part of the Bdpa board at that time. And so I was rolling off and I said, no, this is a perfect opportunity for me to join National Black Mba. And I went through the process, and lo and behold, started in 2019, I became an official board member for the National Black Mba. But about 3 months ago, I was actually voted in by the entire board, right, to be vice chair of advancement and development, right? That's second in line next to chairman. So as you can see, I'm starting to make progress. But National Black Mba, and I mentioned this earlier, 21,000 financial members across 41 chapters globally, right? And so nonetheless, we're talking about the largest career fair in the country. So I'm a part of an organization that's doing phenomenal things for those in the business sector, the technology space, entrepreneurship, all those great things. But now I'm in a position of leadership. And how do we continue to make sure that we're advancing an organization that has so much potential? Very similar to what I did with Bdpa, and making sure that people know Bdpa, people know National Black Mba, because we need, if we're not supporting these organizations, right, who is? And the next one is People's Music School. I was a board member for that organization. That was the largest music program for students of diverse backgrounds in the country. And so providing free music lessons brings people, young people, off the streets. And that was one of the reasons why I was intrigued by that, because I am a musician myself, and I wanted to be in a situation where I could help. And this is where you see the leadership. Being on boards, I think, is a blessing, but it allows you to stretch your leadership capabilities, because now you're responsible to a degree for what happens at some of these entities. And by being in these positions, it allows you to grow and even humble yourself to a degree as a leader to learn, hey, how do you do something for a nonprofit and be able to help that nonprofit scale, and then apply that back to your personal life and even your business life. So awards and recognition, I think this is important, because when you do things, it's not that when I do things, I'm looking for recognition. When I do things, I just want to do it the best that I can. But as it relates to that, organizations who see that will give you some awards to recognize the great work that you're doing. So I won the Whiteboard Challenge. I mentioned that. I received the Dean's Distinguished Service Award at Kellogg, and that was a great award for me, because I was excited given the work that I did in bringing 30 Black students to Kellogg. That's a big deal. UCAN is a nonprofit here in Chicago, and I received the Future Leader Award. Mu Lambda, right, gave me 2 awards, the Professional Achievement Award. I'm a 2-time winner. And when you're accelerating and advancing and elevating in your career, it's great to see organizations like my chapter within my fraternity seeing that and recognizing that, right? You think about Aetna. Aetna every year has an African-American history calendar. In fact, I'm looking at my wall and I'm seeing the post that my brother and I had when we took our photo at the Chicago Theater when it was negative 10 degrees outside. And I can show you that picture one of these days. But we are listed in the 2012 version of their Breaking Barriers Aetna African American History Calendar. So look that up, the Breaking Barriers Aetna African American History Calendar, and we're in there for 2012. And the last one I'll talk about is at Miller Course. It's nice to be recognized at the companies that you work at, and they have something called the VEER Award, which is Building Execution Excellence, or Excellent Execution at Retail. So building excellent execution at retail. That was my ability to deliver a huge project for the company, and they recognized me for that. So that's me in a nutshell. And I know we probably have 18 or so minutes left for questions, but I wanted to spend some time going through this just so you learn more about me, learn more about my entrepreneurial journey, my entrepreneurial journey, some of the things that I did with my career path, leadership, and how I lead, as well as some of the awards and recognition, so you can kind of get the whole picture. But in a nutshell, that's what I would define as thriving in entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship. I will leave at this. It is very possible, and I do it, right, to work for a larger entity and still do your thing on the side. Right. In fact, more people than you realize do that. And in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with that. Right. I mean, there's 24 hours in a day. We get to decide how we use that time. And I would encourage you, it's important for us to be thinking like that so we can continue to build our future and be able to provide not only just for our family, but for generations to come. So I'll leave it there and pass it back over to you.
Thank you, Ashton. And at this time, we'll open up for open Q&A and discussion from the audience. And I'll kick things off. Okay, I got you. Yes, ma'am. That's my little business partner here, Emery. I'll kick things off with this question. Okay, I'm gonna get a question. Hey, banana. All right. So I'll kick things off. Ashton, can you touch on a little bit about how you've been able to balance the entrepreneurial journey with the entrepreneurial journey? I think that ties into LaBelle's question in the chat around time management and project management as well.
Yeah. That's a great question. I appreciate the question, LaBelle. So yeah, it's all about, I mentioned we have 24 hours in a day. For me, it often means limited sleep. I've been getting, and I don't recommend this, right? Some days I'll get 8 hours of sleep. Some days it might be 2 or 3, depending on what's going on. But it's how I allocate my time. And what it is that, let's say you have a day job. You need to really make sure that you're performing in your day job and executing with excellence. That's just bare minimum, right? And once you're able to do that, then you can start to say, okay, well, hey, I'm done with work at, let's say, 5 or 6 p.m. I need to do some other things. Maybe from, let's say, 8 to 10 p.m., I'm going to be working on my startup. And then you also have the weekends, right? And a lot of people, and I'll tell you, when I was in college, and this is where I learned this, right? I realized there's a lot of scholarship dollars out there for those that just would go get it. And I realized that at a certain point in time, those that were winning those scholarship dollars were the same ones that were applying, the same group of individuals. And my brother and myself became part of that crew. We would apply to all the scholarships, right? But at some point in time, just based upon statistics, you're going to win some of them. And so the more we apply to these scholarships, the more that we would actually receive. And so that's how we got into a position to actually be paid to go to University of Illinois, because we spent our time applying to scholarships as opposed to going out and every single weekend with our peers. Now, that was a disadvantage because for the first 2 years of my collegiate experience, I didn't really go out and party like that, like some of my peers. But you best believe the last 2 years I was able to do that with no issue because I didn't have any debt. You know what I mean? So I call it deferred gratification. But for that same principle applies today. Right. I realize that, there are certain things that I need to be at, right? I'm going to make sure that I'm there. But there are other things that's like, if I miss it, I'll be okay because there'll be another one. And so what I realized that I had to be able to validate and fully understand what was very important for me at the time. And for me, it's been able to balance, the corporate experience, right? Being able to make sure that I excel in that space, as well as building the things on the side that drive me. But the last thing I'll tell you on this too is that I've been super crystal clear about who I am, especially when it comes to the corporate side. I've been very clear about who I am. This is what I do unapologetically, right? You have to be able to bring your whole self to work. I never wanted to work at a company that said, Ashton, you got to suppress that. Ashton, you got to be careful what you post on LinkedIn. Why? It's at least I'm talking about my own thing. It's my LinkedIn. You know what I'm saying? I've been fortunate, right? I don't know where these individuals came from, but I have a lot of people who follow me on LinkedIn. I looked at that the other day. I'm like, wow. I see all these updates. I don't know who these individuals are, but it's a blessing, right? But I've been able to use that audience to share so many different things. And I'm bringing that up because it's my audience, and if a company did that, I'd be really concerned. So my point is that I've been sharing this information during the interview process. They know what I do. So there's no conflict of interest. And for the most part, these companies have been like, yeah, hey, if you excel in your work with us, we don't really care too much about what you're doing outside of that. So it's really up to you to prioritize and manage your time. And then the other thing I'll say is it depends on if you have a family too, right? If you have kids, right now you have to figure out how do you balance that. And so then you might have to augment some of the work that you're doing by bringing in other team members, right? And so I think when you start to think about how you balance all of that, it'll help you be more successful. But when you're doing what you love, you find a way to make it happen.
Thanks for that, Ashton. Questions from the audience. The floor is open. You can come off mute, or if you don't want to speak, but want us to ask it, you can put it in the chat and we'll address it. So the floor is open.
We got 13 minutes. Let me have it.
Brother Ashton.
Yes.
Let me hold on. Let me take care of this echo.
Sure.
Okay. I apologize. Okay. I was. Thank you very much, first of all, for your presentation. I appreciate that. One of the questions I have is, as you know, we have a lot of challenge with our young brothers in terms of getting them interested in doing a lot of the fundamental things that you'd mentioned in terms of putting your mind to doing excellence and work there. So what would you suggest is a good way that we really need to focus on helping our brothers that are coming, the young brothers in terms of coming out to see the models that, like yourself and others that are doing things? What are good ways to expose them to the potential that they have in an environment that we are living in today, in a society that thrives on, entertainment and popularity and, getting the most likes and things like that, but focusing on what their skills and gifts are and bringing that out more effectively? What would you suggest is something we need to really do more about? And I'm asking this question from the perspective of both what you was sharing about, what you're doing in terms of the leadership development and challenging others and challenging yourself. So what would be some good tips you would say to our organizations, to our communities, that we can do a better job at helping our young men to particularly focus on lifting up their gifts and skills above the other things that the quote unquote world is attracting them to, which are destructive?
Yeah, no, appreciate the question. Awesome question. So what I'll say is they can't be what they can't see. And what I mean by that is that imagine if you're in a neighborhood, you live in a neighborhood, and I use Chicago all the time, you're seeing certain things that aren't going to drive much value, right? It could be, gang related activity, it could be drugs, right? Things of that nature, right? And that's all you're around. That's all you know until somebody can pull you out. And not everybody is able to be pulled out of the environment and the circumstances that they're surrounded by, right? Not everybody. I mean, let's just be honest. You can't, sometimes you just can't help everybody. No matter what you do, it may not stick. But for those that are like, I want to change my circumstance, I want to live in my purpose, right? That are hungry. And I know many of the young brothers and sisters out here, it changes things when they can see things that they have never seen before. For instance, right? I know some young people who have, seen the Bulls, and I use Chicago, right? Basketball teams, football, so whatever sporting team you mentioned on TV, but they've never seen it in person. And they've never seen it in person specifically from a corporate box perspective. And so now when you bring them into these environments, say, we're going to get you the right outfit, you get you looking sharp, right? So you come in there in a suit, you're going to meet people, we're going to get you prepared. It changes their perspective because it's like, wow, I saw what my cousin and them were doing around the corner, but they're not up here in this box. And so let me start thinking about who's in this box. And they start meeting the key players, right? They realize like, wow, I didn't know I could meet these individuals. And at the end of the day, these individuals similar to me, they may have come from similar backgrounds, but they've been able to transport themselves, if you will, out of whatever environment that they were. And some people were in a great environment to start with, don't get me wrong, but others were in a pretty tough environment and have been able to catapult themselves out. But it's oftentimes because they surrounded themselves by the right people. It's often said that you are the company that you keep. If those young people are surrounded by individuals who are bringing them down, right? That flea that I was telling you about that was jumping up, right? Same concept, right? If all they're doing is surrounding themselves by those types of individuals, they're going to continue to be elevating or operating at that level, right? And it's not probably, at least to them, they may think they're accelerating, but in the grand scheme of things, they're not. And so what I would say is more so exposing these young people to the art of what's possible, right? And really paying attention to those individuals who are thinking about these things. I'll give you another example. In Chicago here, we have the Obama Library, right? That's coming. And it's going to be opening up, I think, in a couple of years, but construction has already started. The Obamas, I mean, they lived in Chicago. They still have a house here in Chicago, even though they live elsewhere. And they come to Chicago because they have this new facility, this new library being built and constructed here in the south side of Chicago. Just bringing some young people to understand the value of that and the importance of being in the right place at the right time and being prepared. Last thing I mentioned this with National Black Mba. We work with many HBCUs. And I can tell you because I went to a PWI, right? And I know some of the challenges that happen at PWIs, right? As well as some of the challenges that occur at HBCUs. But nonetheless, regardless of where you are, it's preparing the students to be well equipped to take advantage of the National Black MBA Conference. And what we've done has been able to help encourage and excite and educate and prepare students so that when they come, they understand what to expect. If you go into an event and you have no understanding, no one's ever told you what it is, there may be a situation where you may not be dressed the part. You may not have your resume up to par. And so the intent for us is to reach out to them and say, no, here are the 15 things that you need to do to be able to go to this career fair. And it's the same with BDPA, right? For you to be able to go to this career fair and land the job that you need that will change your life. And so what I'll tell you is about exposure. And it's also about, and this is more important too, our ability to give back and be servant leaders. I met some brothers and sisters that are a little older than me that say, I give up. I don't have time to give back to the community because I'm so focused on my career. And I question them. I'm like, that's great. But what's the point of you accelerating to where you are if you cannot expose others to how you got there? And that's the difference for me between those that are successful, those that are significant, and then those that are excellent. And I'll focus on excellent because successful means that, you've done some great things. People know who you are. Significant because people really know who you are. They can recite your name and maybe some of the accolades that you've been able to achieve over your life. But those that are excellent are the ones that have helped others along the way. They have been lifting as they climb. And that's what I would say is a key differentiator. And for us as leaders is our ability to be able to lift as we climb, and be excellent is for our ability to give back to those that we serve, and especially in the communities that we live and work in. Hopefully that answered your question.
All right, so we have a
thank
question.
you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I see one, what are some good resources on actually running a business operationally, bookkeeping, hiring? A lot of folks get overwhelmed with the administrative side of business. Yeah, and I'll tell you, that's just the reality, right? There are a lot of administrative things when it comes to running a business. And for me, I went to school, and one would make the argument, can you actually learn to be an entrepreneur, or are you an entrepreneur and born as such? And when we can have that, that's probably a conversation just for a BDPA tech and career talk within itself. But what I'll tell you is that there are so many free resources. When I don't know something, and I'll give you an example, even in my chapter, me and one of my chairs, we're going back and forth on a few things like, how do we show this metric? How do we show this number? And all we did was just do a simple Ask Jeeves, Yahoo search, Google, whatever search engine you want. We got on those platforms, Bing, and did a quick search. And then there were so many materials that said, hey, no, here's how you can collect and put together this KPI to be able to showcase the value. So I'll tell you, your best friend is going to be, the search engine. The second best friend is going to be asking those that you know who have done it. The next best thing is to be leveraging the organizations that you're a part of, Bdpa, National Black Mba, all these associations that have the resources and individuals who have probably been there and done that, who are willing to be able to share that insight with you. And of course, I have to say, outside of experience and educating yourself, is going back to school. One major thing that I think a lot of people realize, that it doesn't matter what age you are, let's say graduate school, assuming those went to college and graduated successfully, there's no one age restriction, and there should not be for those that go to graduate level programs. If you're 31 versus 65, it doesn't matter. As long as you put in the effort, you should be able to do it. And what I'll tell you, it's never too late to learn. So one of the best things that you can do to get those resources is to go to school. But one thing that most people realize and miss out on, or I should say they don't realize, is the amount of money that is there for those that are in school, that are studying, to be able to create and build businesses. I had access to probably more money when I was in school than I do now, because there are so many grants to help young people and students across the board be able to achieve their goals. So those would be the 4 or so points that I would encourage you to learn. And there's nothing that beats that hard work ethic of you rolling up your sleeves and figuring it out. You may fail. We all fail. I fail too. But the great thing about failing is that it allows you to learn from your mistakes, so that one day, right, when the same thing happens, you'll realize what it is and you'll be able to pivot so that you can be successful.
Thanks for that question, JT. Do we have any more questions? I think we may have time for one more before we close. Make sure all hearts and minds are clear.
Looks like very clear, man. My presentation went well, huh? Went over well.
Cool. Well, I'll end this with maybe one. Then, Ashton, is there anything you would do differently in hindsight as you look back over your entrepreneurial and your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a quick example with Ludakicks. Remember, that's the shoe company that my brother and I started. So we would get probably 50 to 100 customer support emails a day. We were selling quite a bit of product, right? Phone calls and all that. And we couldn't do that while we were in school. But one thing, just so you know, so when we had like the individuals that we were partnering with to ship the products, they may use their own model number. So they have like their own manufacturer's model number. And we had our own. Like we would call it like Ludakicks shoe number 1. They may call it XYZ325 or whatever, right? And so we didn't know much about Excel other than you can calculate some numbers in it. But what we realized is that we were doing so much manual work and trying to, when someone placed an order, we would create this very long Word document, and then we would copy, like do a search and then copy and paste their manufacturer's number to our specific number within our system, just so that we can have a connection point. We didn't realize that we can do that connection in advance, right? That we can do that programmatically by using database tables, or even in Excel by using VLOOKUPs and HLOOKUPs and all those great things. Right? We didn't know. So my brother and I would spend 5 hours a day because we have so many orders, which is a blessing, but doing that stuff manually. But now what I know is that there are so many things that you can do from technology's perspective, right? Leveraging the right programming, leveraging the right queries, leveraging the right platform. And so what I would say in hindsight, as you kind of mentioned, is 2020, is that ask if you're doing something and it's taking you forever, or you're not sure if it's the most effective way, just ask somebody. Because VLOOKUPs were around then, we just didn't know about them. We know about it now. So when we conduct Ticket Falcon and helping the goal is to power the world to be able to have the most successful events that they can. right? Helping their events to take flight, essentially. While we're doing that, we want to make sure that at least on our end, we're being as effective as possible. So we're spending more time helping these organizations raise money for their causes than us trying to do these more complicated things that if we would just ask somebody, it would allow us to shave so much time off of our day. So that's one thing that I would say is very relevant, because I remember those days and how tedious they were. And now we don't really have those days anymore because we learned from it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for sharing with us today, Ashton, and thank you all for joining. Before you leave, I want to drop a few links on you. So one is Ashton's LinkedIn. If you want to connect with them, there's a way you can do it. Follow them and connect with them on LinkedIn. Also want to encourage you to register and attend the BDPA conference this year, which will be held hybrid. So we'll be back in person in Atlanta, but it'll be virtual as well. That's August 18th through the 20th. That link is there in the chat also. And then lastly, our webpage for our Tech and Career Talks. So this recording, as well as the recordings of our previous talks, are all out here on this website and on our YouTube channel, which is National BDPA. So check those out. Hope to see you in August. And we look forward to seeing you at our next BDPA Tech and Career Talk here in a few weeks. But thank you. Stay safe. Stay blessed. Thank you again, Ashton. And we'll see you all next time.
All right. Take care.